Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the 214th verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِن قَبْلِكُمْ مَسَّتْهُمُ الْبَأْسَاءُ وَالضَّرَّاءُ وَزُلْزِلُوا حَتَّى يَقُولَ الرَّسُولُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ أَلَا إِنَّ نَصْرَ اللَّهِ قَرِيبٌ. Or did you think that you will enter paradise without such trials as came to those who passed away before you? They were afflicted with severe poverty and sicknesses, and were so shaken that even the messenger and those who believed along with him, they said, when will the help of Allah arrive? Yes, certainly the help of Allah is near. One of the things that we learn from this verse is that it's a universal rule. Every human being, especially those who are seeking Jannah, every human being will experience trials and hardships in their life. And we talk a lot about the reasons by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes us to these trials and difficulties in life. And we know first that we would not experience these difficulties and trials in our life except if it weren't for our own shortcomings. It's because of our own shortcomings that we become subject to these difficult things that we experience in life. And it's in fact a mercy that we experience these trials because they become a purification for those very same shortcomings. So we experience, we commit sins or we disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as a result, we are exposed to trials and difficulties in our life, and if we bear them with patience, we become forgiven for those sins. And it's through these trials that we prove our faith to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the hard things happen to you in life, and you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're patient with it, and you endure it, and you trust in Him, and you make dua to Him, knowing that all things come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you've validated your belief. We claim to believe, and then you prove that faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially when hard things happen to you. There's another aspect of trials and hardship and pain that I wanted to highlight today. I want to introduce it first through a technique that's used in life coaching. There's something called the life wheel. And so you can just imagine it, but it's an exercise that's done where you would draw a circle and then you would divide it into even wedges. So it ends up looking like a pizza. And then you would label each wedge according to some different aspect of your life that's important to you. So you have a wedge of this that's for your spirituality and your religion. And then a wedge for your wealth, and a wedge for your family, and a wedge for, so it goes around. And you list out all the things that are important to you. And then you go and you shade in and you fill in from the center outwards according to how satisfied you are with that part of your life. And then the resulting shape gives you some visible illustration of what your life status is like. And there's a couple of interesting trends. There are some people who will fill in each wedge like halfway or a little bit. And so what you see in the picture then is a full circle that looks underinflated. And it's interesting because that's how they function in their life. Like you're riding on an underinflated tire. You're moving along, you're just not doing so effectively. But because you keep moving, you're just kind of struggling along, a person stays like that and generally doesn't do much to change the situation in their life. There's another trend that's more applicable to the topic of today's khutbah, where a person feels really good about most of the different wedges in their life, the different sectors of their life. But there's one that causes them a lot of pain. There's one that is in really bad shape. And so if you can imagine again what this looks like on the picture, it's exactly like as if you were riding on a wooden wheel with a missing wedge. Just like the picture looks. You would go around smooth, but when you get to that wedge, it hits hard and you feel the disruption. And so life goes like that, but every time this part of your life comes into play, it causes you pain and it causes you discomfort. What's interesting is that that's not a bad scenario because a person in that situation is the most likely to do something to rectify that part of his life. Pain is an indicator for us. Besides all the other benefits and comforts that we're told why we experience the hardships, pain itself causes us to respond or to make some type of positive change in our life. Think about just a simple example. If you put your hand on a stove and you don't realize it's hot, immediately your body responds and your hand pull away so that you don't experience too much injury from that. Imagine if you didn't feel pain at all. There's actually a hereditary disease. It's known as hereditary sensory autonomic neuropathy. And those who suffer from this in the extreme cases, they don't feel any sensation of pain. So on the surface, it doesn't sound like such a bad thing. Until you look at the cases of these are little children born with this disease, of what their life is like. That in their early stages of their development, they experience self-injury. They hurt themselves without even realizing it. For example, they will chew on their tongue, thinking it's some kind of toy or something. And they will chew and gnaw on it until it becomes mutilated. And as they develop and they grow, they have a tendency for their spines to become curved because they don't realize the discomfort of poor posture. And it was up until recent medical advancements that 50% of the children who suffered from this would not live until the age of 5 years old. And then it really makes you hit home when you look at or you listen to what the parents of these children have to say. One parent says, "I wish I would give anything for her to feel pain." And another parent says, "A world without pain is hell." An amazing thing. We complain so often about the pain and hardship that we experience in life. And here, these are people who wish that they could experience pain because that pain prevents us from harm. And so our bodies respond like that. Our whole personalities, everything in our life, we complain about the hardships and the difficulties in our life. In reality, those very things cause us to improve and to perfect our life. When something's not going well, the pain, the emotional or physical suffering that we experience from that causes us to take action and we put attention to that and fix that part of our life. And so imagine then if the body of believers, if the entire community responded the same way. That if one group of people or one individual was experiencing pain, that the rest of the body responded. I bet you can guess the hadith that I'm going to mention to you next. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that the believers, when it comes to their mutual love and mercy and compassion, they are like a body. When one part of it is hurting or complains, the rest of the body joins in staying awake and suffering fever. And so oftentimes we mention this hadith to emphasize that we should have sympathy for other people, that we should feel so and so. But perhaps it's more appropriate to take this hadith more literally, the same way that our bodies react. If you go back to the example of your hand on the stove, you don't feel the pain and then the rest of your body is like those poor fingers, they're just sitting there burning. Automatically your muscles contract, your arm pulls away, you might take a few steps back. The whole body responds to make sure that the hand stops burning. Imagine if we as a community responded in the exact same way, that one part of us, one part of our body of the believers is hurting and the entire community responds to relieve that pain. The next hadith, I think you could consider it a plan for the community that the Prophet ﷺ laid out for us. How to build an amazing community, and it's this hadith is going to be the topic of my khutbah today, inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, by the way, this hadith, Imam al-Nawawi included it in his 40 hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever relieves a believer's distress of the distressful aspects of this world, Allah will rescue him from a difficulty of the difficulties of the hereafter. Whoever alleviates the financial situation of one in dire straits, who cannot repay his debt, Allah will alleviate his lot in both this world and the hereafter. Whoever conceals the faults of a Muslim, Allah will conceal his faults in this life and the next. Allah is helping the servant as long as the servant is helping his brother. Whoever follows a path in order to seek knowledge thereby, Allah will make easy for him, due to that, a path easy to paradise. No people gather together in a house of the houses of Allah, reciting the book of Allah and studying it amongst themselves, except that tranquility is descended upon them, mercy covers them, and the angels surround them, and Allah makes mention of them to those in His presence. Whoever is slowed by his deeds will not be hastened forward. I introduced the khutbah today by talking about the general aspects of pain and how pain itself is beneficial for us because it's an indicator, something that helps us realize the things that we need to pay attention to. And then directly take that same analogy of the Prophet ﷺ and how the entire Muslim should act like one body. So when one part of the body is feeling pain, when one person or one household or one group of people are suffering and going through hardship, the rest of the body of the believer should respond. And then I mentioned this hadith to you, and we're going to go through that in some detail. What's interesting is that you find in the first part of the hadith a repeated theme, that the Prophet ﷺ is giving us an instruction of what we're supposed to do, and it would have been sufficient if he left it like that. That this is what you're supposed to do, period. But he gives you the instruction of what you're supposed to do, and then it comes with a promise of divine aid. So you help your brother, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds in kind. And that's something that we know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-jaza'u min al-jins al-amal. That the reward of the deed is similar to the nature of the deed itself. And so if you start in the beginning where the Prophet ﷺ advises us, whoever relieves a believer's distress of the distressful aspects of this world. The word that he uses is Khutbah. This Quba is anything that causes distress to the soul and preoccupies the mind. In other words, the things that causes us stress. And if you look at all the different things in our life, especially nowadays, of all the things that cause high levels of stress, it happens in our relationship, sometimes with our spouse, or oftentimes with our children. It happens in our health, sickness and disease, and even traumatic events. There's a whole study of post-traumatic stress disorder. When you lose a loved one, or you're subject to some natural disaster, all of these things are distressful situations that people experience. And so the Prophet ﷺ is telling us here, is that when you see your brother, you see a person experience a distressful situation like that, we're supposed to intervene. And there's so many ways that we can do that. Sometimes it's just some information that you have, just a piece of knowledge that you have. The Prophet ﷺ told us that the religion causes ease, it makes ease, ad-deen yusr. And so sometimes a person's functioning, and it might be something from the worldly knowledge or some religious knowledge, that a person is suffering from something just because he doesn't know exactly how to respond to it. And even wealth, so many people go through financial times, and there's a specific mention about this later in the hadith. But in general, we have the opportunity to relieve distressful aspects. How many times have you met a person in the masjid who has their hands up? We look down on these people sometimes. And a person will tell you, I don't have anywhere to stay tonight. And we ignore them, or sometimes even you hear people say ugly things about them. But the reality is, whether it's their fault or not, or whatever you want to say about them, that they're in a situation that none of us would like to be in. And imagine that you have the opportunity to follow exactly what the Prophet ﷺ described for us, to relieve a hard situation of a person. You can even help people by your authority. And I think this is one of the motivations for us to be successful people. It's not about, love of the dunya and I want these positions to be big. No, but the reality is that a person who is in a better position, who has better authority, who has more money, is more able to help people. Imagine if you were trying to achieve success in the dunya for that purpose, not so that you can enjoy the dunya more, so that you can come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by helping people more. Just the other day, Imam Zahid came to me and said that there was a sister who was struggling looking for a job. I wish that I was in a position that I could have just said, no problem, I'll give her a job. It's a motivation for us that don't think that we're supposed to just exist in this world without achieving success. And again, it's not about love of the dunya. It's about being in a position to help other people. Sometimes just good advice is a great benefit to people. They just need the right advice. Or sometimes they just need you to listen to them vent. The other day my cousin called and she was going through a difficult time. She was looking for my wife. So I just asked, I said, is everything okay? And so, she complained a little bit about her situation and I said, is there anything you can do to help? I can do to help. So she tells me. Later on my wife said, yeah, she called. I said, did she tell you what she needed? She said, no, actually she just vented the whole time. That's all she really wanted to do. She just wanted somebody to listen to her, somebody to understand, somebody to sympathize with. Even dua, you have to believe that when you make dua for somebody, it's not just some spiritual practice, that it can have a real practical effect. That when you go, and maybe some of you have experienced this in life, and that you believe it, then you should be certain about it. That it's by the dua of a person that you got some relief. Imagine, if you just cared enough to take a moment and make a dua for somebody, that Allah will count that as a way of relieving distress. And for all of these things, what's the reward? that the Prophet ﷺ said that you will be relieved of the distressful things in the next life. What's so stressful about the next life? Consider the Day of Judgment. A day that the sun is just like 1 mile away, so close that there's no shade at all. People will be drowning in their perspiration, all these difficulties on a day that lasts 50,000 years. And we have the opportunity for that very long day to make it easier for us just by doing something sometimes so simple to make it easier for other people here in this life. The next instruction that the Prophet ﷺ gives us, he says, whoever alleviates one in dire straits who cannot pay his debt. We live in a time where we go through recessions all the time. We see people all the time lose their job or go through financial difficulties. It's probable either you had to ask someone to borrow money, or you were in a position where somebody came and asked you for money. It happens all the time. It's a very common thing, and we should help each other out. But it becomes stressful sometimes. Asking for money, by the way, is a hard thing to do. And then paying it back when a person has a hard time, it's amazing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed us. وَإِن كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ فَنَظِرَةٌ إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ وَأَن تَصَدَّقُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. And if the one in debt has a hard time, he runs out of money, then grant him time until it's easy for him to repay. But if you let it go as a way of sadaqah, that's better for you if you knew. So there's two levels here. The first part, as if it's a command, that if you loan somebody money and they're having a hard time, it's as if it's a command, obviously if you're able to, that you shouldn't impose on them, you should extend the deadline. And then if you want to be that next level Muslim, if you're looking for the higher grades of paradise, Allah says it's better for you if you just let it go. If you just let it go. And again, it's not just a command, it's a command that comes with a promise. That if you did that for people, Allah will alleviate your debts in this life and the next. In this life and the next. Can you imagine that we know that we owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has commanded us to do certain things. So we owe Him our prayers, and we owe Him our fasting, we owe Him all sorts of sacrifices that He's commanded us to do. Imagine that you come up short on the Day of Judgment. What a terrible situation to be in. But perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will overlook the debt that you owe Him because you helped somebody else out in this life that we're in. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that there was a person who was involved in trade who used to give loans to people. And if he noticed that someone was in a hard circumstance, he would tell his servant or the boy, he would say, excuse him so that Allah may overlook our sins. Therefore, Allah overlooked his sins and forgave. And even if you just look at the context of the hadith, he wouldn't wait for people to come and ask for an extension. If he noticed that they were having a hard time, he would let it go. Interesting enough, Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, he said that if the opposite is true, that if for no reason, if you don't need money and you make it difficult for people to repay you, then maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it difficult for you in this life and the next. By the way, all of what's been mentioned so far, even though the Prophet ﷺ said if you help a believer or if you relieve a Muslim, the scholars agree that the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning that as a way of honoring believers, and it's important to help them. But this applies to any human being. That if you help any human being who's in need, who's in financial distress, that you can expect the same reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The last one, the Prophet ﷺ says, whoever conceals the faults of a Muslim. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ explains in more detail, whoever conceals his brother Muslim's private affairs will have Allah conceal his private affairs from the Day of Judgment. And whoever uncovers his Muslim brother's private affairs will have Allah uncover his private affairs to the point that he will expose what occurred in his house. And so if you look at this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is touching on all the different aspects of life. On the traumatic events that we experience, on financial hardship, and even the spiritual hardship. We mentioned already that committing sins is harmful enough. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us not to do certain things because it's bad for us, it makes our life difficult. And then there's consequences of sins. And it becomes even more of a distress when those sins become exposed. So even though a person commits a sin, you have a role to help make it easier on them. They had some weakness or for some reason they committed a sin. But you even if you're not part of it at all. You have a way to help them recover from that sin by concealing their faults. It's an amazing thing that somebody else makes a mistake and you can help them out of that suffering by at least not exposing their mistakes. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, the Prophet ﷺ rather, he says, Allah is helping the servant as long as the servant is helping his brother. A story to close with. Once the companions were traveling, and some of them elected to fast and others took the permission to not fast. And so those who were fasting, it was difficult for them. They were weaker or they were thirsty. And so the ones who weren't fasting, they compensated for that. And they basically told the fasting companions to take it easy. And so they did all the preparations. Maybe they cooked the food, tended to the animals, whatever the case might be. When the Prophet ﷺ noticed this, he said that those who were not fasting took all of the reward for today. I mean, it's an exaggeration, of course. He's not taking anything away from those who are fasting. But he's praising and exalting the reward of those who worked hard to help those who were going through a difficult time. Allah is helping the servant as long as the servant is helping the brother. I just want to read the remainder of the hadith for you again. Whoever follows a path in order to seek knowledge thereby, Allah will make it easy and due to it a path to paradise. No people gather together in the houses of Allah, reciting the book of Allah and studying it among themselves, except that tranquility is descended upon them. Mercy covers them, and angels surround them. Allah makes mention of them to those in His presence. Whoever is slowed by his deeds will not be hastened forward by his lineage. It seems as if it's disconnected from the first part of the hadith. But I don't think that's the case. That the Prophet ﷺ starts by giving us instructions how we should be helping each other, actively relieving the pain and distress of one another. And then he tells us to seek knowledge. Not just seek knowledge, but do it together. To gather together and study, learn the Quran, and put aside any cultural or lineage differences that you have. This whole hadith is about living like a single body. Being a single community that looks out for each other. That a community that learns and acts upon knowledge. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve us of the difficult things that we're experiencing in this life. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us able to relieve our brothers and sisters of the difficult things that they're experiencing. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it an easy day for us on the day of judgment. And to gather us in a gathering better than this in Al-Jannah. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ سُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ وَبِحَمْدِهِ أَشْهَدُ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنتَ نَسْتَغْفِرُكَ وَنَتُوبُ إِلَيْكَ وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ